This video is brought to you in part by DraftKings Sportsbook. If I told you that PlayStation and the Magic the Gathering folks spent half a decade teaming up on a card game and the entire world did not care? Well, I did just tell you that. This is the Eye of Judgment, a grid-based PS3 trading card game that utilizes all the buzzwords, from the PlayStation Eye webcam peripheral to state-of-the-art cybercode technology, allowing the camera to scan the cards and bring them to life via augmented reality battles right on your TV. This cybercode tech was so advanced that it needed two supercomputers during production just to scan the cards, and they even utilized a special ink to ensure that you couldn't print your own cards, an anti-piracy measure that didn't even last a week because it was in fact regular ink. Of all the things shown at the meme-filled donut that was PlayStation's E3 2006 conference, this is both one of the more interesting games and one of the least remembered. I mean, come on, an early-ish example of an online card game with voice chat support so you could talk to your friends while playing, and it featured the same deck that you were building by hand? If card games are your thing, that's gotta sound awesome. On top of that, the game played on a 3x3 grid with a unique gameplay approach, putting two players in this back-and-forth war of attrition. First to hold 5 of the 9 tiles wins. Not only does this mean that there's no possible way to win in the earliest turns, forcing all players to take at least a slightly more thought-out strategy compared to other card games where you can often employ rushdown tactics. Not only that, but everything from the terrain of each tile to the direction you placed your cards could affect your attack and defense strategies, so rushing is actually super likely to get you swept if you're not careful. And you could watch these dynamic battles take place with allegedly cutting-edge AR graphics. It's almost like the Yu-Gi-Oh game you always dreamed of playing instead of the ones they actually made when you would realize that you only watched the anime and didn't actually know the real card game rules. Of course, the Eye of Judgment is probably forgotten for a reason, right? Yeah, from the game's high price tag, even before adding in all the booster packs you were supposed to be able to find in stores, to the fact that the card game is almost unintelligible to play on its own without lugging a whole PS3 camera and TV setup wherever you go, to expansion sets that required you to buy the DLC just to have the right to use the cards you already bought, all the way to the fact that this card game was made by folks at PlayStation's Japan studio who willingly shared that they had never played card games before making this card game. They kept sharing that info, unprompted, several times. Honestly, it might have been a cry for help. Speaking of, please subscribe, this is all I have. Originally planned for a 2006 holiday launch alongside the new console, the Eye of Judgment even matched the PS3's fuck you, pay me price strategy, becoming one of, if not the first, $70 disc-based video game 15 years before it was cool. Of course, it came with the PS3 camera packed in, a starter deck, a booster pack, a playmat, and a camera stand, but all of those are necessary, and that's to say nothing about the 5 elemental themed decks or random booster packs you could get for $15 and $3.75 each respectively. So 70's kinda conservative. The game did get held back until October 2007 in the end, to buy time for more polish, to avoid even more sticker shock on top of the PS3's short-lived $600 price point, and to make sure that there were other PS3 iGames that could actually release alongside it. Notably, none of those other PS3 iGames were made by Sony's Japan studio like the Eye of Judgment was, but instead in London, where the PS2's iToy concept had first blossomed. Indirectly, this means the British are ultimately responsible for Astrobot. Do not tell them that. Now, if you've ever wondered what Sony's coveted Japan studio was doing during all those years that it wasn't doing anything, here's your answer. There wasn't just one team at Japan Studio, or even 10 teams. That office was filled partly with individual producers keeping tabs on and assisting the external projects made by third-party partners, the stuff you love, like Parappa, Patapon, Hot Shots Golf, like half of Ape Escape, or to circle back to E3 2006, the game that brought us the giant enemy crab. You ever wonder why Japan Studio wasn't making more of your favorite series? Most of the time, the people that made those games never worked there. Most of Japan Studios' ludography is this way because much of the early Japan Studio staff came from Sony Music, so it was sort of run like a record label. Then you had Japan Studios' two quote-unquote proper teams, Team Ico and the Siren Gravity Rush team, which still of course featured folks that would come, go, and bounce around between projects. And the rest, the bulk of Japan Studio, was made up of a bunch of small, less than supervised breakout groups, toying with smaller scale ideas like Loco Roco, eventually with random tech experiments like webcams or what would become PS Move as developers jumped to Japan from London Studio and elsewhere to try and help give some structure, and then also a bunch of people were just kinda twiddling their thumbs at any given moment. Why were they often left to their whims? Well, because Japan Studios' head was also forced to run around like a madman as he filled vacancies also running the rest of PlayStation's software arm worldwide. So kinda just some top-down bloat here, and it's from this wider group of rudderless boats that the Eye of Judgment first spawned. Exact details on how the game came to be are on the scarce side, but what we know says everything we need to know. At 2006's E3, one of the Eye of Judgment's producers shared that, essentially, researchers at Sony had come up with this cybercode concept, and with no idea what to do with it, they pawned it off on these poor souls to try and turn it into a game. Big fans of recycling at Sony, between this retrofitting the PS3's camera with glowy-balled motion controls, retrofitting those glowy balls for VR, and the fact that the PS5 recycled the PS3's no games gimmick. I'm kidding, don't hurt me. If you really want to feel bad for these producers, one of them even admitted during the same interview, as I said earlier, that he had never played a card game before designing this one. I'm guessing the interviewer was dumbfounded because he didn't even try to follow up on that? I feel like that'd be the first question, would be, what the fuck? Anyway, the Eye of Judgment started development sometime around 2003, with 2 full years dedicated to ironing out the card game logic and the final year doing the video game part. How much involvement Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast had besides actually printing the cards is also hard to say. More on the gameplay in a sec though. By this point, they had figured out how to get this high-tech cybercode to work with the PS3's relatively low-res camera, but how does it work? Explaining that first involves opening the starter set I got for like $10 a few months back and doing a good old-fashioned pack opening. Always gotta flip the first 3 to the back, that way the rare card is the last one. Simply put, each Eye of Judgment card is printed with 2 digital identifiers. First, a set of neon green triangles in the same spot on every card. These are reference points, since cybercode is just kind of a barcode that's designed to be scanned and read from any possible angle. Once the camera knows the card's relative position, it can read the black bars on the top and the bottom of the card that are unique to each species of card and set up the playing field accordingly. Despite what the tutorial says, the actual runes on those barcodes are mostly just for aesthetics, as it's just the black bars themselves that the camera actually reads and understands. If you've watched my video on the PlayStation Move's even shorter-lived Wonderbook peripheral, these barcodes and the 4 anchors on each page will look pretty familiar. Wonderbook was, as far as I can find, the only other use that cybercode ever had. In the Eye of Judgment's case, the camera was meant to be mounted on a custom-made stand that came with the game itself, aimed at just the right height so that it could see the entirety of the provided playmat. It doesn't actually matter which edge of the mat you choose to put the camera on, though it's recommended that you put it out of the way of the TV so that, you can see the game, and that ideally it's on the side of your non-dominant hand so that you don't accidentally nudge it out of place while playing, which is easier to do than you might think. If you're playing locally and both players are lefties or righties, I guess flip a coin. No coin is provided though, you gotta bring your own. Was this precarious to set up as is, given how short the PS3 Eye's wire is? Yes. Did I have to film myself setting up a lot of this to show you how cumbersome this can look? Yes. Did I really have to use a second PS3 camera for coverage though? Also yes. Once you've got the camera set up and calibrated so the game knows where each player is, the cybercode gimmick is surprisingly competent for the time, although even slight glare or lighting changes did make it finicky for me at times. The eye keeps tabs on the board state with every action by both players, so if you, for example, rotate a card without telling the game that you are performing that action, or if you forget to take a defeated card off the board, it won't let you proceed until you do. That's both one of the game's coolest aspects, and also part of what ends up making it a headache to ever try playing without a PS3, which, defeats most of the point of the whole trading card game angle where you can play it wherever you want. Plus, although the Eye of Judgment was touted as using some special printing methods to avoid illegitimate cards, within 6 days of the game's October 2007 release, people had used regular old 2007 printers to photocopy cards and fool the eye. The most you usually had to do was use a highlighter to brighten those little calibration arrows, and then you were set. No, it's not like you can actually use these cards to cheat, at least not fully. Each player has a deck of 30 total cards. You can only have 3 duplicates per card, and you have to discard down to 7 cards if you ever have more than 7 in your hand. Since the PS3 is keeping track of which cards you've played or discarded and how many cards are in your hand or in your deck, you can't just sleight of hand your way into a perfect strategy to fool the computer opponents. You can, however, absolutely look at your deck and reorder the cards however you would like, or swap in some of your own printed cards. Well, kinda sorta. They did come up with a creative, albeit a bit clunky, solution to cheating in online play. In order to play online, you would register 1 or more summoning decks in-game based on the cards you wanted to put into that deck, and then you would select that deck that you want to use prior to matchmaking. The game then handles shuffling and dealing cards for both players by itself, and it requires you to search your physical deck for the corresponding card that is being dealt to you, and then show the eye that you've actually drawn the right card. You could still use printed cards to make those decks and in those decks so long as they scanned properly, but you couldn't stack the deck in your favor online. You still kinda had to play by some semblance of rules. The Eye of Judgment's biggest shortcoming, in my opinion, is related to this fact that it relies so heavily on the PS3 to do so much of the work for you. See, they never brought forth a subpar, let alone acceptable way to keep track of all the different facets of gameplay without the software carrying the load, making the physical collectible card game aspect both a gimmick and a limiting factor. Since the cards were functionally unplayable on their own, it didn't matter how good the game was or wasn't, it had no chance of breaking containment. Case in point, there is a full hour of plotting tutorial videos baked into the game because there are a bunch of systems that interplay, and because so much time was spent conceptualizing the core rules that by the time it came to draw the rest of the owl, there was no room for an organic tutorial or story mode to ease you in. You don't need to watch the whole hour at once, and thank God there are chapters you can kinda skip around on, but odds are if you stop partway through your study session, you're probably not gonna come back. There's also a 4-minute long opening cinematic that I swear to God feels like it's gonna end 6 different times, and this is the only story content the game had for about a year for the record. If there's one thing I know about the audience watching this video about an obscure trading card game, it's that you like football. That's why this video is sponsored by DraftKings Sportsbook. Maybe you're excited to watch the Red Guys take on their rivals in Brazil. Maybe you want to watch 2 cat teams hissing at one another before they get it on to remind you of your childhood home's alleyway. Or maybe you have a guess as to how many times an engagement ring is shown. If so, and if you're responsible, DraftKings Sportsbook is here for you. New customers that sign up using the code TheGoldenBolt can bet $5 to get $300 instantly in bonus bets, and they can get $200 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. If you were already looking for a way to watch this weekend and all season, this offer through DraftKings Sportsbook might just be the one for you. Remember though, only bet what you can and do so responsibly. Thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook once again for sponsoring, and now, back to the video. So like I said, both combatants have a 30-card deck made up of 2 types of cards: creature cards, which are placed down on the board, and spell cards, which rather than being placed down, are offered to the eye itself. Additionally, there are 4 contextual function cards that help you specify spell or attack targets, cancel a very limited number of actions, end your turn early, or simply see the full state of the game board. At the start of the game, both players draw 5 cards, and if you don't like your hand, each of you can take only 1 mulligan and redraw all 5 cards, with no penalty for doing so. Whoever's going first doesn't draw a card on their first turn, but after that, each player will draw at the start of their turns, and if they run out of cards, they lose. The goal in the Eye of Judgment is to control 5 of the 9 field tiles at the end of your turn to win, or to deck out your opponent if a game goes long enough. Each turn is split into 5 phases that really could have been explained as 4, but they went with 5. When your turn begins, you draw a card, Phase 1. Immediately after is Phase 2, Mana Charge. You'll always gain 2 mana here at the start of that turn, which is your energy for actions. At the beginning of the game, you each start with 0, you'll gain 1 extra mana for each time one of your creatures is defeated, and you'll spend from your pool of mana starting in Phase 3, the Action Phase. Here, you can use any spell cards you have, rotate any of your own creatures 90 degrees in either direction, or attack with an existing creature card, provided that you have the mana to do each or multiple combinations of these. Each creature can only rotate once per turn though, and same goes for attacking. After doing any or all of these things, you can summon a single new creature card on a space per turn, again if you have the mana for it, to enter the Summon phase. Now you can only summon to a field tile that isn't yet occupied, and each player's first creature can be placed on any of these open tiles, but once you have one out, all subsequent creatures must be summoned adjacent to an existing creature on the board, whether it's yours or the opponent's. You should be careful though, because the camera generally picks up pretty quickly when you've placed down or shown the eye a card. You can quickly cover the card with your hand if you realize you want to rethink it or change the card's direction, but once the eye marks something down, you can't undo those. If I'm starting to lose you, don't worry, it gets more complex from here. Each creature has not only a summon cost and an often different action cost, as shown in the larger and smaller numbered bubbles on the left side of the card. They also have one of 5 elemental types, an attack power, HP, potentially a summon effect which may or may not actually be properly explained on the card, and an attack and defense pattern or zone. If you summon your creature and its attack pattern would hit an enemy creature as shown on the bottom of your card, you enter a sub-phase specifically for battling. Now if you hit a creature in their blind side, you will do 1 extra damage and they don't get to counterattack, but if you hit them in a direction where they have a defense zone, they will counterattack you for the damage amount shown on their card. All this buildup leads to these climactic AR battle animations, which are quick cutscenes in the vein of a Fire Emblem or Shining Force duel, only with hilariously cheesy voice acting. I will say the battle music absolutely slaps though. Each stage has a number of different themes that swap out depending on the board state or if you're in quote-unquote check. They're just the right level of crunchy mid-2000s metal. Once you've finished attacking and or taking a counterattack, you'll commence with the Trash Resolution subphase if there are any dead cards that you have to move to your or the opponent's graveyard. Trash Resolution was my crunchy mid-2000s metal band name in high school. Once that's done, we can move on to the final phase of each turn, Resolution, which will handle any miscellaneous end-of-turn effects that may have activated during the turn but not fully, well, resolved. This all described one player's turn, and there's an entire layer on top of this too, or rather, underneath it. See, each field tile on this 3x3 battle grid will sport one of the 5 elements: water, fire, earth, wood, and the neutral biolith. Water and fire are opposites, earth and wood as well, and each field tile also has a reverse side with another element as indicated in-game, which can differ based on the stage backdrop or the game type that you've chosen. If you place a water creature on a water tile, you'll get 2 extra HP, but if you placed it on a fire tile, you would lose 2 HP. Likewise, if you had a creature on a matching field tile and the opponent played the Field Quake spell card to flip that tile, you would lose the type matching bonus HP. If you were already low on health, losing that 2 HP can kill you, and if your water creature's field tile was flipped, for example, from water to fire, you would actually lose 4 total HP. Biolith creatures get no bonus or penalty for being on any type of field, and a bunch of these cards can have additional summon effects for being on or off specific types of terrain, which add even more strategy layers to the mix. Between all of this and the strategic options naturally present when crafting your deck from the 110 different cards featured in just the base game of the Eye of Judgment, you can see how this would rapidly ramp up into this complex web of decisions and qualifiers to keep track of. You have to keep an eye on the orientations and blind spots of both your cards and your opponents, the fields that they're on and each field's reverse side, your respective mana pools, bonus effects, and the action cost of your already summoned creatures, your and your opponent's possible spell cards, all of it. Some creatures have long range attacks, others are magic creatures whose attacks will bypass the counter-attack state entirely. Spell cards can do anything from give you mana for discarding 1 card from your hand, to giving every creature of a specific type a health bonus, to forcing every creature in the game to fight one another all at once, just because. Certain creature cards will synergize if they're placed near a specific other card as well. Other higher level cards have a tiny lock on them, indicating that they can't be summoned whatsoever until there are already a certain number of creatures out across the board to break that lock. And the truest death knell to keeping easy track of all of these different values and variables, some cards just don't fucking say what they do. For example, there are a few bonus abilities like dodge or quickness. The card will say just that one particular word half the time and not actually explain what it does, and leave a bunch of empty space right underneath where they easily could have just explained the goddamn ability. A creature with dodge has a 50% chance of avoiding any physical attack. Again, they don't provide a coin for you to flip. Instead, they say that rock, paper, scissors is considered by the game to be a valid 50-50 stand-in, which really isn't how that should work. Meanwhile, quickness means that if you've got a valid counterattack during a battle sequence, your card will counter before the opponent's initial attack hits, which can actually mean you might kill a creature before it even gets to attack you like the player tried to do. Kinda cool, honestly. Higher level abilities, usually from those cards that are locked until later in the game, include straight up possessing an enemy card as if it's your own. It won't count towards the get 5 tiles to win stipulation, but you can attack with it. And again, many of these aren't explained on the cards because the PS3 game handles that for you. If you wanted to play this game locally without a PS3, like say you really loved the game and you brought it to lunch at school, assuming you somehow didn't get bullied for that, you would still have to bring the PS3 game's manual at the very least just to read from the glossary of terms in case you didn't know what any one ability did. There aren't too many abilities in the glossary, thankfully, only about 2 pages worth, and the more complex ones are usually written out for you on the card, but still— oh hey, PlayStation Underground. I actually filled this out and mailed it in just to kind of waste a stamp. There's no chance that that P.O. box is still theirs and that it's still active, but I will keep you posted if I get anything back. I will not get anything back. Sorry, anyway, that need for a glossary gets even worse when you find out about the rare pulls, the full art cards. They're just a picture. It doesn't even say the creature's name on the card, let alone what it does, which means that when you're battling your friend at school in this hypothetical, you could just do the Yu-Gi-Oh thing you did as a kid and make some shit up, because it's not like they can prove you wrong right there. Between this issue with basic information, the fact that there is no built-in way to keep track of HP, no damage counters given to you, they think that Rochambeau is a substitute for a coin flip just so they don't have to give you a coin. They would expect you to write down the different stage themes and their default field placement since they don't put those in the manual, and then you would be expected to come up with a shorthand to memorize and visualize what type is currently active on each field, since there's certainly no provided markers or tokens given to you to help you indicate that shit. You start to see the problems I'm talking about here? A physical card game that you cannot play without software, no matter how briefly they pretended that it was playable on its own, is maybe the worst brand of DRM I have ever heard of in my life, because it's not just digital rights management, it's PRM too. As I noted earlier, it gets even worse than that when you factor in these sets 2 and 3 of the card game, which respectively released in spring and fall of 2008. To use 200 of the 300 or so cards in this $70 to start card game, you would first have to buy cards from the new set. I mean, first find them and then buy them if you can find them, and then go onto the PSN store and buy the PS3 game's 2 $15 DLC sets that unlocked the ability to play with those sets of cards that you may have already purchased. Those cards are already patched into the game with the updates. You have them on your system, but Sony somehow pioneered the online pass here with goddamn trading cards. Also, wait, it's also an offline pass. Good God. Somehow I've got one more for you. This was one of the first half dozen or so games from the pre-PlayStation Trophy era that got patched with both trophy support and a full Platinum trophy. But that Platinum requires this paid DLC since some of the trophies require the later sets of cards. Most of the game's lore was also added with this late third update in a new bonus features section that I couldn't access without buying the DLC, so I'm pretty sure it's also locked to the $15. With no story mode, just some bots of varying difficulty, limited gameplay options unless you want to play an Eye of Judgment themed version of War, and with a fun, if overly complicated flowchart of strategy that makes it completely unfeasible to play without having a PS3 right nearby, it's no wonder that support plans for the Eye of Judgment suddenly dried up by the end of 2008. And the thing is, it's not at all a bad game. It's complicated, verbose in how it teaches you, expensive, sure as hell expensive, and not at all like what you would usually expect from a card game, especially during this era, but that also means that there's really no game I can think of that's quite like it. Even playing against the AI was unique, fun, and I felt like I was learning my basic starter deck relatively quickly. I wanted to start experimenting, even knowing that it's impossible to find cards nowadays unless you print them yourself. With proper, better thought out support, and in general, way more forethought into trying to make this both a video game that used trading cards and a proper standalone trading card game that's enhanced by the AR features, this could have been something. Something niche due to its learning curve, sure, but something. There was a plan to release a complete edition on disc that didn't require the updates, but this eventually got canned. Yusuke Watanabe, the senior director and producer who kept admitting that he had never played card games before, apologized for that complete edition's cancellation and additionally for any issues that came up related to this clunky mix of digital video game with physical cards, before being the one to announce that they were sweeping the entire 5-year project under the rug and saying that they were aiming to make the next game they worked on far more engaging thanks to all that they had learned. To their credit, the Eye of Judgment team maybe did show that they learned from feedback when they revealed the Eye of Judgment Legends on PSP in 2009, a year after suddenly cutting future support for the PS3 game and its trading cards. This game would end up releasing in spring 2010, about 6 months before the PS3 game servers were unceremoniously field-quaked out of existence. As a bit of cross-promo, some creature cards ended up making a cameo in Hudson Soft's 2009 PSP download title Creature Defense, itself a hybrid deck builder and tower defense game. And you thought the roguelike deck builder genre only started recently. Pfft. The Eye of Judgment Legends course-corrected in a few key ways from the console original. In lieu of requiring the physical cards in any way at all, it has all 300 plus cards digitally in the base game for you to use, as well as a handful of new ones which, to be fair, are kinda locked to day 1 DLC, which is kinda lame. Legends naturally had all of the built-in lore that they were late to deliver on console, and most notably, this version has a full 20+ hour story mode in addition to the now also defunct online play. Say hello to Karryu Kazuma. Now, Legends is still missing basic quality of life features like a quick retry or a guided deck building tutorial at the start of the game, not to mention weird stuff like the player still being red and the enemy blue, or the crime of having to remove some of the hilariously corny AR cutscenes to fit down into the game's smaller file size. Whatever the case, Legends took the messy bones of the PS3 game and turned it into an actual video game. There's no gimmicky pack buying in real life or in the game, you just buy cards individually using money earned in the story mode. You can trade cards with others locally or online to not only keep that TCG element alive, but to probably improve it for most players who likely never met a soul in their life that also knew that this game existed. Lo and behold, when they picked a lane and stuck with it instead of awkwardly straddling the line between two different worlds, it worked out so much better for the end product. I mean, there's no chance this sold as well as whatever low watermark the original had, given that this game was download only on the PSP in North America, the only place where the PS3 version seemed to do better than abysmally? To that end, there's not even a video on the internet showing the PSP version's end credits, so we don't even know who actually worked on it, and therefore, if it's actually the same group of designers that learned from the PS3 game's mistakes, or if anybody actually made the game at all. Maybe Legends just spawned out of the ether, only to be referenced by its parent company twice in 6 months and never acknowledged again. Whether that's better than the marketing and year of post-launch support that Eye of Judgment PS3 had depends on how nihilistic you are about your card games. In terms of overall quality though, this worked out so much better. Now, could I have beaten the game to find and show those credits myself? You fucking kidding me? No.